And we are back, and it is time for the ElseWords. This is our discussion topic, the main enchilada of our show. And
This is straight up chimichanga.
yes.
This is gonna break some shit down.
So this is going to be very interesting. Because we are going to talk about the Marvel Retailer Summit.
And how could
And
we not?
yeah, I mean, yeah, because we're a financial podcast. Of course, we'll talk about this. But there's some parts in here that I honestly feel like that really should be addressed. That we could talk about, because the big thing that came out was that what's his name? Sorry, dog decided he wanted in, and he just busts in like a little jackass. The Marvel Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing, David Gabriel, he had made a quote that said, "People don't like diversity. People don't want, they want the core characters back, not, excuse me, speaking of belches from earlier, they don't want diversity and all that stuff." And I read the update, the fixing of that quote, and this makes sense. But they talked a little bit about there's a new initiative called Generations that was revealed in the summit, and it's a way for to set people's minds at ease, that the core characters will continue. But I want to read something here, and I'm actually going to read it like throughout the whole thing, because it's a topic that it's an anecdote that Axel Alonso gives fairly regularly. He goes, I tell the story all the time. He said, "My wife is Korean. I've got a Korean nephew. This Korean American kid couldn't sleep at night. At 4 a.m., he's looking at the ceiling because he just found out the new Hulk is a Korean American kid. He's terrified he's going to be the next Hulk. I had to get on the phone with him and tell him, you're okay. First of all, it's not a curse. And second of all, there could only be one Hulk. But put down that phone and settle down for a minute. Just let it settle in for a second. This little kid suddenly identified with the Hulk in a way he had never before. He'd seen the Hulk before. He liked the Hulk. He liked Captain America, but now suddenly he can actually imagine himself as the Hulk. I think that's a cool little story. That's all Axel Alonso. I emphasize some of the things in there, and that's where I feel like a lot of people sort of got like misinterpreted some things that were said about legacy characters.
Well, no, a lot of the stuff started out with David Gabriel and his comments. Let's elaborate a little bit on what he actually said. When asked, he said there was a big shift in the entire industry, and there were a lot of factors behind things changing at Marvel. And one of the things that they were hearing was that diversity was not appealing to some of their older fans. Diversity of the characters and things were causing the sales to slump. Now, they also said things about the election causing sales to slump. They said some stuff about DC causing their sales to slump. I don't remember exactly all of the context of that. But what people were hearing, and what crossed a lot of blog sites, clickbaity headlines, was that basically this guy is saying diversity in comics doesn't sell. It doesn't work. And that is not what he actually said. What he said is, these are things that we've heard. Whether or not we believe it is something else. And he actually had made that statement. Now, he then had to come back later on and start clarifying, because everybody's already saying, oh, so diversity doesn't work, so you're going to get rid of all your diversity. And again, that's not something that he said either. But there has been some rumors that Marvel is going to get back to some of their meat and potatoes characters. Now, some of these things we know don't necessarily have anything to do with diversity. Now, there is the introduction of a lot of new characters. So we go back a few years. I don't remember what the crossover was. It was one with Nick Fury where he whispered something into Thor's ear and basically made Thor unworthy. And suddenly we had in Jason Aaron's
Original
Thor
sin.
book, yeah, we had the introduction of a new Thor, a female Thor. And after a period of time, we found out that that was um, Jane.
Yes, that was Jane
Yeah,
Foster,
Jane
um,
Foster.
who has terminal cancer, um, which it sort of does the one of the reasons why I got into Marvel Comics over DC was because I found these people so human.
Right.
Where DC had the gods, but like it was all like their gods and stuff like that. Even Batman, I mean, he trained his body to the peak performance. But with
Which is probably why at DC I relate to a lot of the sidekicks.
yes, yeah, um, but over at Marvel, it seemed like everyone had this weakness, a weakness to them, and that's what made them more relatable for to me.
Imperfect.
So yeah, imperfect, yeah, these imperfections. So for example, the fact that while Jane Foster is going around doing the whole alter ego thing and has terminal cancer, she's going to chemo and getting the radiation and all that stuff for it. Every time she transforms into Thor, all that stuff just gets wiped out of her.
Right.
So she's essentially killing herself by protecting everyone and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um,
But again, I mean, that happened. That was something that felt like it was sort of inherent to the story, but it was a big deal. We're replacing Thor. I think Marvel even did they showed up on The View or something introducing the female Thor character.
yes,
I know
yeah,
they did it a couple of times with different things. We have the Miles Morales character who was introduced several years before as part of the Ultimate Universe, which is already a big deal. Is they replaced what was that universe's Spider-Man with by killing that universe's Peter Parker off with a mixed race, African American and Latino,
Puerto
Puerto
Rican.
Rican. Thank you. Character, and making him that world's Spider-Man. And then they shifted him over to this universe. Now, shifting him over this universe didn't take away Peter Parker. Peter Parker still exists, but the status quo of Peter Parker changed around the same time. So now there's two Spider-Men.
Yep.
Then there's Kamala Khan, who in many ways is probably the best example of a legacy character at Marvel because she exists not as a replacement for Carol Danvers. Carol Danvers had already, for a number of years, been upgraded to the Captain Marvel character. So there's a Miss Marvel name that's out there, and a brand new character created takes that name but is not trying to be the same character, is very different in feel. At most, it's like I've got the same name, and for a while she had a similar costume. But developed her own identity and everything very quickly. My one complaint about Kamala Khan is that she is an Inhuman in a universe where they're trying to introduce all these Inhuman characters, and it feels like I would rather some originality and difference in the origins of the characters.
Yeah,
But the Inhumans is a sign of part of why Marvel, I think, is having problems. We'll get to that. Those are ones that are good examples. And I don't think anybody has specific complaints about any of those. Like most people might say, well, I like the Odin son more than I like Jane as Thor, but the Odin son got his own book and has existed continuously by the same writer, in fact. So if you were enjoying Jason Aaron writing Thor before, you can continue to enjoy him writing Odin son in a different title, and you get the Jane Foster Thor as a bonus if you enjoy it, and if you don't have to read it. But it is like it's a journey for them. Some other things happened. Captain America, Steve Rogers gets replaced by Sam Wilson, who was classically the Falcon, has been a partner to Cap for a number of years. It's much the same as if Bruce Wayne had given up being Batman, and instead of having Dick Grayson take over, which is what happened before when Bucky, as the Winter Soldier, took over as Captain America, in this case now it's like, oh, well, now I'm going to have Tim Drake be Batman instead. The concept of a Black Captain America, again, is not new. They had one years ago in the what was it? The Captain America White miniseries. There was some miniseries that they had where they introduced that there was a black Captain
Red, White, and
America.
Truth. It
Red,
was
White, and Truth.
actually,
Yes.
yeah, it was actually Axel Alonso's one of his early books that he was an editor on.
Yeah. And Sam Wilson, my only problem with it is that I think Falcon is a fantastic character already. I don't need to see the character move up in anything else. I don't see that as a graduation for him. I already think he's cool. I was like, I like sidekicks. I like Falcon as much or more than I like Cap. And I always dug his costume and everything too. The old 70s cheesy red with the white V-neck shirt and everything. I don't know why. I just did. Then we got into some other strangeness. The replacing Tony Stark with a 15-year-old African-American girl who is a super genius who created her own armor. But then to do that, they basically off Tony Stark. He's also gotten replaced by Victor Von Doom, who is a white guy who's got a lot of history in the universe. So if having white people around is your, like, I need this to enjoy these books, there's still some white heterosexual dudes around in all of Marvel's universe. You're not really missing too many. What was the other one? Iron Man, Cap, Thor. I know that there's one more. Hulk. Yes. So
Hulk with Amadeus Cho, which is what I mentioned with the quote.
Oh Lord. The Hulk one is in many ways, I think, the biggest example of doing something wrong for maybe the right reasons. Not so much that Amadeus Cho, who is again a character that I really dug, I found a love for that character when the Hulk book was taken over by Hercules. So it was the Incredible Hulk for a while, and Amadeus Cho was this, 15-year-old genius kid who was hanging out with him, and it was always like Hercules and Amadeus Cho with pup in tow because he had a puppy with him the whole time. I thought that book was great. I thought the character was great, but in some stupid ass Civil War sequel, they randomly have Bruce Banner get shot by Hawkeye, and that's not a crime apparently, because Bruce Banner might have become a bad person in the future and done shit wrong based off of the visions of some character that nobody had any fucking idea who he really was. And that also did a lot of damage to the Carol Danvers character at the same time in a lot of people's opinions. It was a poor story to make something happen. And then to follow that up, they take Amadeus Cho, who is, again, a character that already has an established ability to be in the books and is cool in his own right. And they say, oh, well, let's make him the new Hulk. So person of color, teenager, let's throw that out there. And then She-Hulk becomes the new Hulk as well and gets all her anger over from her cousin because she couldn't stop it from happening and she's all pissed off now. It's
that one, honestly, with that one, because this is where I'm gonna be like, wait, hold up here before you go, because you're not reading comic books.
I'm
this
definitely
one,
not.
Where she's in the book called Hulk, she hasn't hulked out once yet. This is I would say more of the getting into the classic Bruce Banner aspect of this, where she is dealing with all that anger, so she doesn't want to, because she's not going to turn into Jen Walters, just taller, green, buff and stuff like that. She's gonna rip arms off and
but that is the complaint of people, is we had the Hulk and we had She-Hulk, and She-Hulk was very different from the Hulk, and she was her own character, but they decided to get rid of the Hulk and turn She-Hulk into the Hulk. And by doing that, one, getting rid of a character that we liked, and two, changing another character that we liked to fit the type of the first character, replacing a character that didn't need to be replaced. That is the level of complaint of people who they're saying that they've heard aren't enjoying the diversity of Marvel
Yeah.
Comics. And this is what was listed as the problem at Marvel right now, or being discussed as the potential problem, what they're hearing. Again, not what they're saying. Marvel very much believes in diversity. Now, some people have claimed Marvel only believes in diversity in as much as it makes them a buck, and they will turn like a dime on diversity if it stops working for them. I don't believe that. I don't believe that because one of Marvel's big problems is no characters can succeed in a book if they're less than 20 years old. That has been a big problem for them. The most successful character from the last few years has been Deadpool, and Deadpool had 20 years leading up to becoming that successful of a character. But everything else that's been introduced new has been a much harder sell. So putting other people into the togs of Spider-Man and putting them into the roles of Iron Man and putting them into the roles of Thor is, in their eyes, the best way to introduce characters. Now, that is not technically true, because like we just said, yes, Kamala Khan is called Miss Marvel, but it's not like Miss Marvel has had a book called Miss Marvel in probably 20 years in and of itself. And her book has been very successful. A lot of new books that were introduced that were, I'll call them boom type titles, meaning they had an aesthetic and writing style, an art style similar to what you'd see at a lot of the boom books now. Things like the Squirrel Girl title, the Hellcat title. A lot of these books were very new tries for Marvel, and with different ranges of success. They did not sell, at least on the newsstand, like what Marvel expects from their other titles to do. Mockingbird made it up to issue 10, I think, was lauded by a lot of people as being a very good book. And I think right about the time that people were really discovering it, about the time that the t-shirt cover came out and everybody flipped out because it said something along the lines of "ask me about my feminist agenda," and the F word on the internet just seems to break fucking Reddit like a 4chan dick. I think that a lot of these titles were a great sense of experimentation. At the same time, DC was doing something like that with their DCU. You know, the success of Batgirl of Burnside had a lot of titles that followed it. The Black Canary title. I don't remember all the other ones, but they came and
Gotham
sadly
Academy.
Gotham Academy. But a lot of them came and went. You know, it was because these companies are not Boom. These companies are not Image. These companies have served an aesthetic and a story type for 50, 60, 70 years. They have been all superheroes, all spandex, all the time for a long time. And it is what most people think of comics being because of these two companies, because of DC and Marvel. So when they do try something new like this, one, they don't have the expertise of it that a Boom who's doing it naturally does. They don't have the expertise of it that Image does, because Image is hiring creators that this is the way that they make comics. And I'm not saying that the creators that came over and did this at Marvel don't do that, but now they're trying to do it with characters that they didn't create. They're trying to do it with characters that have to fit into a shared universe in a lot of ways. They're having to do it to a Marvel audience who is frankly not ready for that. That is the most I will say about where diversity maybe didn't work out for them. But let's take a look at another thing. Let's take a look at why Marvel may be suffering right now in the industry, why they are struggling. And there's things behind the scenes that we have to kind of take for, well, it may or may not be true, but it seems pretty kind of likely that it is true. Marvel did everything they could to break the X-Men because they don't like sharing the X-Men with Fox Studios. They don't like creating stuff in the comics and having Fox profit off of it, where Marvel can't. Marvel broke and got rid of the Fantastic Four, as Beat's mentioning right as I'm getting to it. The Fantastic Four doesn't have a comic right now. Some of the Fantastic Four characters don't exist in the Marvel Universe right now. On top of that, they broke everything with the secret War or whatever book that they did. I don't remember what it was. That was like, let's
Secret
break continuity.
Wars 2.
Yeah, Secret Wars 2. Let's break continuity a little bit, and we're going to keep Reed and Sue over here, and we'll let Johnny hang out with the Inhumans, and we'll let Ben hang out with Guardians or someplace else. We don't know where Ben is. Ben's got his own shit going on. But Ben always kind of had his own shit going on. Marvel seriously went after the X-Men, though. Like, seriously. By saying, we don't want the X-Men to succeed, we'll make a new X-Men that we can control and we can have movies for. And they did that with Inhumans. And as much as they tried to force it, it didn't take. Now, you have your random things here and there. You've got Miss Marvel, who is an Inhuman, but doesn't succeed because she's an Inhuman. She succeeds because she's Miss Marvel and because the writer and the artist on that book made a really compelling book. The only reason why sales started to go down on Miss Marvel is because the book's been relaunched several times because of all these crossovers and stuff, and because Marvel has a tendency to relaunch books over and over again, which kills sales. It gives them a bump up for that first issue, and then the sales always fall further than where the book was already. But killing Marvel's, like, basically their workhorse, which the X-Men were since the 80s, I think is a big deal. And so they're just now getting around to getting some of those characters back. They're doing it in a weird way by also introducing characters that have been time displaced for way too long and still trying to run with a storyline of, like, here's the original X-Men in their teens/20s running around the Marvel Universe in a way that makes no real sense. We'll keep shoehorning it in. And part of that has probably been fixed by Secret Wars, but it's one of those things that you have to explain to a new reader.
Yeah. Well, yes and no, because they've hit the end of that with this, and in All New X-Men number 20 or whatever the last issue of All New X-Men was that came out last week, they actually did go back into the past.
They did,
and
they said, "Oh, well, it's broken. Time is broken. Time's rejected us from going back."
There's a group of people there who are the X-Men,
right? Meaning that these X-Men cannot go back probably because they're from the 616 universe, and the whole Marvel universe is not the 616 universe anymore.
Yeah, or they're basically.
Yeah, which is, again, then we just have to deal with these other fucking ones running around. Like, in the 90s, right before Heroes Reborn, Marvel tried to basically fix Tony Stark by turning him into a teenager.
Yeah.
And it's one of those crazy-ass stories that you just do and you hope it's going to make sense, but it didn't really make sense, and nobody was really into it, and thank God they did Heroes Reborn at the same time, which is a strange thing to say because Heroes Reborn was kind of a big piece of shit. But still, that's kind of the thing, is if I walk into a comic store as a fan of the movies, if I walk into the comic store as a fan of Marvel Comics from 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago or whatever, I'm going to be pretty fucking confused by trying to figure out why there's a 17-year-old Cyclops hanging out with this group called the Champions when Cyclops is older and with Jean Grey and is in the X-Men. Oh, but he's in the X-Men too, but he's not older because the older one just died, and so they're all teenagers, and Angel's got fire wings now, and Iceman is apparently gay all of a sudden. Because Jean Grey told him that he was, and then told older version of him that he was, and he's like, "Yeah, you're probably right." And I don't have a problem with the fact that this guy has probably always been gay. It's been hinted at more than enough times in the comics, and a lot of people are really upset, like they're changing Iceman to change him, even though now we kind of understand that Iceman doesn't have a history with his other Iceman, but he's getting his own book. So this is, to many people's eyes, this is doing diversity in the wrong way. Even if you say, I don't like diverse characters, I just want white heterosexual men, who I again argue, they're all over the fucking place in the Marvel Universe. You cannot walk anywhere without bumping into a white heterosexual male. Be careful on the bus, people.
I'm going to
Even
point
if
out.
that
So I'm going
is
to point
not what your problem is, the state of changing characters seemingly for the idea of making them diverse without having a coherent story to make sense out of it, or without just saying we're introducing new characters. Like when Young Avengers was running with Gillen and McKelvey, and they all kind of identified somewhere on the LGBT scale. It worked because they were all new characters. It worked fine, you know. But there is a problem of, do we want a diverse universe that we have to shoehorn in, or can we do things more naturally? And the other part of it, and I think the bigger problem of it, is not that all these new characters are existing and are in the books and stuff. It's that when the originals are not in the books, like, it's okay for me to say that Sam Wilson is Captain America, but maybe my preference is Steve Rogers. Well, Steve Rogers is still there. It's just that he's Hydra Nazi. That's weird. But I'll tell you what, in the 80s or 90s, if that storyline was happening and he was still the only Captain America, people would have been sort of okay with it. They would have been upset. They would have been like, what the hell's going on? But they could have accepted it mentally. But what they're seeing is, okay, so I get new Cap, who is maybe not my favorite, or I get old Cap, who's now a completely different character and makes no sense to the history as I understand it. So I don't have my favorite Captain America anymore. In Iron Man, I get Iron Man Von Doom, or I get Ironheart. But I don't get Tony Stark, who is maybe the guy that I like. And, oh, by the way, we just recently killed War Machine stupidly. So I can get where that's coming from, but I don't think at all that that's Marvel's intent.
No.
Marvel's intent is to sell you comics. Marvel's intent is to sell as many people as many comics as they can. Marvel's intent is to give you what you want, but give new people what they want too. And they're having the exact kind of growing pains that any company would have when you're trying to introduce new product. At first, your existing audience is going to resist, and your new audience doesn't exist. You have to find them and draw them in, and you're hoping that you're going to catch them by word of mouth or off the street or through digital or whatever. But that's a hard thing to build on. The problem is you break the boat while you're building your life raft. It's like, hey, we're gonna try to get to shore. We need to build a raft because the boat's too big to go to shore. So to build a raft, we're gonna start taking planks off the bottom of the fucking boat, so we can build this little raft. Well, that's great and all, but while you're building the raft, we're over here sinking. Marvel's sinking. And that's what they're experiencing right now. Retailers are not saying we don't like diverse books. A lot of retailers are saying we absolutely love diverse books.
Yeah.
What Marvel wants to hear versus what's being said are two different things. And I think what Marvel is refusing to hear is that the stories have not been good, that the cost of entry for comics that have gone up to $3.99, $4.99, $5.99, in some cases $9.99 for a single comic, which is actually a pretty good value when you consider the amount of pages in it. That is keeping people away. The events that go on and keep repeating and don't actually finish anywhere, but disrupt the extenuating books,
Yeah.
are wearing down users. So I think...
So I want to hit on that real quick. I want to expand on that because I was flipping through that. And Axel Alonso had mentioned in here that when he came in as editor-in-chief, they did AVX, and he suggested multiple artists and multiple writers, and that Dan Buckley went Red Hulk on him. It's because it's not the way we do events, and so they're smartening up about the events books, where they're going in a lot of ways what DC did with the Batman and Robin Eternal, where you have multiple writers, multiple artists, where we do a weekly book.
But is that always the right choice? So here's where here's where Buckley came from, and I kind of, I'm old school, so I kind of agree with that. There is something to be said for an event where it's an anthology type series, where each new issue gets a different artist, maybe a different writer, and you get to see things from different perspectives and stuff, and that feels okay. My problem is when you have events and you make we're going to have Mark Miller write this and Steve McMillan's going to draw it. Great. You know, I don't like Mark Miller, but Steve's art is fantastic. Can't wait to see that. Issue 4 comes out and there's Steve on a couple of pages and then fill-in artist for the rest of it. By the time issue 6 comes out, Steve's not on the book anymore. So you got pulled into this event series that is all supposed to be one long storyline and have consistency. And we know by the end on most of these events that the artist isn't going to make it all the way through. People are frustrated because it feels like bait and switch in that. And I think that is a problem. Now, if you plot your things ahead of time and you're not building a universe-shattering event every 6 months, maybe you can get an artist to finish the fucking 6 books. And maybe you can tell your writer not to say at the last minute, oh, instead of 6, it's going to be 8. That's what a fucking editor does, is they keep the shit in line. And Marvel doesn't keep the shit in line. And now what they're doing is it sounds like they're excusing themselves from keeping it in line. And I think that that's proven that if people are already not buying it, that's not the direction you follow through on.
Yeah, and it seems like they're trying. We're saying, they talk about managing talent and stuff on here. It seems like they're trying to work in ways that will get that will make these events to where they don't overlap. Like, because that's the big thing is, like, they're overlapping, or you get instances where for example, Champions debuted before the I cannot think of what the series was. That was the event that sort of before Civil War II finished, which was sort of what caused them to say, hey, Avengers, we quit, we're going to be something better than you guys and all that. I will say, since we are running long on this, we'll leave the art of the URLs, the links to it's a 3-part article thing on there, and it is a great read to look at. They hit everything from Marvel trade pricing, securing the talent, event fatigue and timing of events.
I mean, there's another thing to be said about Marvel's quality of art. There's a number of times that I've looked at Marvel books that have been coming out over the last couple of years, and I just question, this is the best artist they could get for this title. Now, I love stylized art. I love Humberto Ramos. I love Chris Bachalo. Chris Bachalo, one of my all-time favorite artists, and his run on Generation X with Scott Lobdell when they co-created the title, it stands out on my heart as one of my all-time favorite runs of any comic. And his art is heavily stylized. The character's very skinny, oblong, weird. And I totally dig that. Ramos, I really liked his stuff when he did Crimson at Image. Was fantastic. I loved him, I think, when he was doing Impulse over DC. So the right book, he works really well in. But part of the problem with consistency of artists is that if I get someone like a Greg Land, who's not a favorite artist of mine, but let's say Greg Land is doing a book, and I get 2 issues of Greg Land, and then I get an artist who looks very cartoony versus Greg Land's artwork, which looks very photorealistic. I'm gonna have a problem with that. I'm gonna have a problem because the consistency is off, especially if it's in the same storyline. Of like, but this is not how Cap looked. This is not how any of the other characters, the supporting characters, look last issue. Like Sharon Carter's hair is completely fucked up from last issue, and she looks nothing like the same character. It's very confusing. That consistency matters. So if you're trying to introduce an artist with a new style, which is a non-house style, and I don't like house styles, it's one of the problems I had with the New 52, is that all the books look very homogenous to each other.
Yeah.
You've got to give that person a book that is going to let their style shine, and you've got to give them the room to introduce their style so that it all feels cohesive. So give them their first story arc, their 6 issues, that they can't stay on the book past that or stay on schedule past that. That's one thing, and that's a problem with artists, unfortunately, today. There are artists who can really nail out pages, and then there are artists that can't. But again, that's a scheduling thing more than anything else. If your series is a series of mini-series, or you have breaks in it, like Fiona Staples on
Saga.
God damn it, Saga. I was gonna say
Saga.
Fables for some reason. Fiona Staples on Saga. There's a couple of months break in between each story arc, but we accept it because it's fucking Fiona Staples, and it's her book.
Reminding me that we're in a break right now with that.
Yeah, I know, but it's okay, because when it comes back, it's gonna be Fiona Staples on it again, and that's sort of the important thing. Marvel has resources. It always kind of bugs me when Marvel thinks that they should be able to have the same successes as smaller companies, but don't feel like they should invest in the way that smaller companies do. Like smaller companies like Boom and IDW, they put their asses on the line to make those books happen. And Marvel has the ability to do it without putting their asses on the line. I mean, I know they got stakeholders, and I know that they've got Disney above them telling them what to do, but you can fund a lot of shit based off of their Star Wars sales alone.
Yep.
And so Marvel should be a place that can experiment, but experiment smartly. And it's like, oh, well, we want to introduce a Squirrel Girl book. Okay, well, maybe think about who your audience is. Is your audience for Squirrel Girl going to be the same people who pick up an Old Man Logan? Probably not. Is it going to be the same people who pick up New Avengers? No, unless it's the Squirrel Girl that's been in the Avengers titles as the babysitter for Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. But this Squirrel Girl looks like she's aimed towards the Tumblr crowd. Let's try to get the comic out where the Tumblr crowd is going to see it. Let's publish it online first. Let's do a few issues, put them in the can for free, and put it out there for people to see it, for that audience to find it. And then we can lead them back either to our own digital marketplace or Comixology, or lead them into the stores. Say, hey, this comic you've been getting, now we're going to do a regular series of it. Go into the stores and buy it. But don't just put that shit out there to the regular Marvel audience and expect the regular Marvel audience to buy it, or for the Tumblr audience to find it without being led to it. And Marvel has the ability to make something like that actually happen. It's like how we've said for years that comics don't advertise on TV or during cartoons or any of the places where you think, hey, I should see an ad for a fucking DC comic here while I'm watching Justice League. But I don't. So if I'm a kid watching Justice League or Teen Titans for the first time, I have no idea that those things exist in comic books. What the fuck? They can do that. We need them to do that. They need to do that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's going to wrap it up here for us. Mainly because we are going long on time, and I'm looking over at my dog.
We're going to talk some shit. We're going to talk some shit. Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, you want to know who that person is who reads both Squirrel Girl and Old Man Logan? He's your co-host.
Well, you're big on Tumblr.
No, I'm just big.
And in the garage.